Happy Sabbath, church. I'm so glad to see you all here this morning. I understand that we have an international audience because we are transmitting and across the globe into different places. So our message is not necessarily just for us here. It's not necessarily just for me and you, but for everyone that's tuning in. So welcome, welcome, welcome to everyone. Truth isn't complicated. It is not complicated. It only gets complicated when we don't want to do something, or when we don't want to admit something, or when we don't want to submit to something. Then the truth becomes a problem. Truth isn't necessarily complicated. So my sermon title today, actually it's not a sermon, we're just going to have a little conversation. It's called Sum of All Fears, the Sum of All Fears. And you look at it and say, okay, well, what is he talking about? Is it the sum, like the totality? We started adding up all our fears: fear of spiders, fear of heights, fear of people in Florida afraid of lizards, believe it or not. All these different fears, if we put them all together, what do we have? We've got the sum of all fears. But then there are those fears that are a little bit more, I should say, they kind of get to the heart a little bit more, those fears. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but it's not just a matter of a totality, but it's a matter of how do we feel? Do we live a fearful life, right? So the title of the sermon actually came from a novel that was written by Tom Clancy in 1992. And it's really about the Cold War. And for those of you that are there in a number of years, remember that there was a Cold War between the U.S. and Russia. And actually it still is. They just changed it. It just moved into a different phase. But there was tension. And some folks decided to use that tension to create an opportunity for themselves. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to have the U.S. and Russia fight a nuclear war. The rationale for that is these two countries, these two major superpowers would destroy each other, and what was left, then they would be in charge of whatever was left, which in a nuclear war would be not much. But to them, being in charge of a little bit is a whole lot better than being subjugated, when you have all these other things to your disposal. There's a lot of people that want to have power. There's a lot of entities that want to have power, and they'll do anything to do it. So here's the deal. These people that wanted to get the U.S. and Russia into conflict, into a nuclear war, they were not friends. They were on opposite ends of the globe, actually. But they got together because they had a common goal. And their common goal was to create a nuclear war. These were the Palestinians. And you had some East German terrorists. And so they set out to set this thing in motion. And so we get to understand that these two, even though they don't get along, but they got along because they had one common enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Military term. And so when we look at it in Jesus' days. You had a bunch of different groups of people going on. You had four major groups, but the two major ones were the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Different end of the spectrum, different philosophies. But they got together and they say, we're going to have to end this thing. We're going to have to end this guy because what he's doing is putting our position in jeopardy. And we have to do something about it. So they set out that we're going to arrest this guy. We're going to do everything we got. We're going to harass him, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to get rid of this guy. A sad-looking image up there, isn't it? But that's what war really looks like. So they went to arrest him, and they tried to harass him, and because of who he was and what he represented. So Jesus' enemies are still active today. They are very much active. They, just like the Cold War never ended, this war never ended. It just shifted a little bit. And so increasing pressures are coming upon Christians. Christians are being persecuted today. Christians are being killed today. And the message that Jesus brought was a message of hope. They're still attacking that message. When I say they, we're talking about socially attacking it. I just saw the other day where they're teaching kids in elementary school about different kinds of, they call it health education, but it's really sex education and indoctrination, right? This is going on in elementary school. And to be quite frank, I get indignant and upset when I start to look at these things like, are these people mad? Okay? In the political realm, we think that, well, we can legislate morality and we try to put these laws in effect. And over time, we've discovered that you cannot legislate morality. People make choices based upon the information that they have. So, even in the church, there is error. There's lots of error in these different churches. And so the gospel is being attacked on all fronts. On all fronts. So, though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. It is multiplying exponentially, right? So God in his foreknowledge knew that this world would get to this point. He knew that the world would get to this point, so he rose up a church. He rose up a church and gave that church a mission and a commission to preach the three angels' messages, the everlasting gospel. Now, it's a simple message. It's really a simple message. It's nothing like, the 2300-day prophecies and the sanctuary service and all these other messages that are shrouded in symbolic language. The three angels' message is very simple, right? So why haven't we as a group, as a people, as an individual gone out and had some kind of a personal zeal to preach the message? Because the same people, same kinds of people that were lost then are the same kinds of people that are lost today. Why haven't we? And there are, of course, a myriad of reasons why we haven't done this. I'm talking about taking a personal approach, not a corporate approach to church, the conference. I'm talking about a personal approach to teach and preach. I submit to you that the reason we don't do personally is because of fear. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons, I'm sure there's many, but one of the reasons is fear. Now, this assertion that I'm making is not based upon some kind of a publication by the church organization or any secular. It's just based upon my own personal observation. Folks are afraid to engage other people. We are afraid to engage other human beings, even for their own life, for their own soul preservation. So we come to church and we get quite comfortable here. And, many different churches, we come to church and we get together, we fellowship together, we have lunch together, we go out and we do things together, and it's great, it's wonderful. The disciples did that, they got together. The early church got together. There's nothing wrong with getting together, having church. I love you guys. We all love each other. But if I were to put this in military terminology, this is like planning for battle. We come to church to get fortified, to get renewed, to get supplies, to strategize, to go do battle, if I'm going to use the military terminology. This is where we prepare. But the battle is not here. The battle is out there. The battle is not in the church. The battle is out there. So we have to go from preparation to engaging, right? We've done enough preparation. We've been preparing for many, many, many years. It's time to join the battle. And you say, well, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can do that. There is such a blessing on the other side of fear. There is such a blessing on the other side of fear, but we have to get to the other side of fear. All right? So let's try to understand fear. Where does fear come from? Where does fear come from? Why do we have so much fear? Genesis 2:25. Yeah? If you got it, you can pull it out. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. This is Genesis 2:25. So there was no fear before sin. We get to Genesis 3:9 and 10. The Lord then called to the man and asked, "Where are you?" And he answered, "I heard you in the garden, but I was" what? "I was afraid." Okay, so why are you afraid, Adam? Why are you afraid? Because I was naked, so that I hid. You can do a sermon on that naked thing. Because I was naked, so I hid. Fear is a result of sin. Okay? There was no fear before sin. Sin came in, now we've got fear. Okay? Let's look at another byproduct of sin. Genesis 1:26. The Bible says, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created male and female. He created them in his image. So how has sin affected our relationship with the animals? Remember, we were supposed to have dominion over these animals, right? Well, I won't soft pedal it. I was tempting to soft pedal it because, believe it or not, I had a little bit of fear this week in preparing this message. This title of my sermon is "Sum of All Fears." But this week I had some fear about presenting this message. I had to use my own message to calm my fears. All right, y'all get that in a second. In his 1986 book, Mark Twain, y'all probably know, some of you have read some of his books back then. And back then, he was required reading when I was growing up, okay? In a book in 1896, and the year is very significant. We're talking about 1896. A lot of things were happening in the late 1800s in terms of awakening and just understanding human nature. So in this book, he compared the dispositions of animal life with human beings. Now, this is a secular guy, so I'm not, he's not preaching to us. I'm just using something that he did to make a point. So he compared the disposition of human beings to animals. And so on one occasion, he noticed or observed a group of people going buffalo hunting. And so they hunted these buffaloes, and they killed 72 buffaloes. This hunting party, they killed 72 buffaloes. They ate half of one buffalo, and then they left 71 buffalo out in the field to rot. So he says, okay, well, that's how man behaves. Let's see how the animals does it. So he gave a huge snake, anaconda, young calves. Gave him 7 young calves. Put them in a huge cage. Anaconda ate one calf and left the rest of them alone. Didn't put any interest in them at all. As a matter of fact, didn't show any type of aggression to the other calf. The anaconda ate and was satisfied. He also observed that men, rich men, accumulate wealth, who have accumulated wealth, will go to great lengths to accumulate more wealth. And we, you, us, human beings, have a rabid hunger for more wealth. We want more. We don't get enough. We want more. As a matter of fact, we'll go to great lengths to take from someone that has meager means to satisfy our own appetite for more, because that more is never satisfied. Never satisfied. So he did an experiment with some animals, and he gave them food and see how they would store it up. And most animals, once they got fed, they were done. They were finished. Squirrels, bees, and certain birds, they do accumulate food. But here's the thing. I've noticed it myself in my backyard, where sometimes I throw out nuts in the backyard to feed the squirrels. But they won't only take enough for like a winter supply, cold snap. They won't just continue taking. Human beings don't know when to say when. So what does that say about man? Okay, let's just talk about cats, for instance. Anybody ever cats? Cats are very loose. If you have never had cats as a pet or your children, cats are very loose. But the thing about cats is they don't have a consciousness about their looseness. We do. So we have a looseness, we display looseness, but we can't use the cat's excuse of unconsciousness. We are conscious of the things that we do. So he concluded that man is incurably foolish. Incurably foolish. So he did a simple experiment. You can teach animals very simple things, but man just seems not to be able to comprehend these simple things. He says in an hour, he taught a cat and a dog to get along. He put them in a cage, and in an hour they were good. In another hour, he added something else. He added a rabbit to the cage, and the dog and the cat and the rabbit got along just fine. In 2 days, he added a fox, a goose, a squirrel, and some doves. And in a few other days, they were just fine. He added a monkey later on, and they all just coexisted in peace in this cage. The animals get it. They understand that we're all in this together. So they coexist peacefully. We haven't gotten that yet. Okay, so as we're talking about animals, you ever notice that they say that a dog is a man's best friend? I've heard that before. A dog is a man's best friend. I wonder about that, a dog being a man's best friend. So people have comfort dogs. You have, what's the other one? Service dogs and all these other kind of dogs. I'm wondering, why do we have these dogs as service? People have been hurt by other people. Ain't nobody ever been cheated on by a dog. Ain't nobody ever No dog ever came in somebody's house and taken their money, and a dog has never broken anybody's heart. So we take comfort in how animals treat us. More comfort than another human being. Sin causes fear. We are fearful. Sin causes fear. Fear causes selfishness and self-reliance, which drives us away from God. I'm going to say that again. Fear causes selfishness, self-reliance, which drives us away from God. Let's talk about a story in the Bible. A gentleman by the name of Saul. He was the very first king. Y'all know that story. Very first king. So I'm going to go directly to 1 Samuel 28, where we talk about Saul's issue, where David came in to rescue the situation. So it reads, when Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. When Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. Medium. Some people say witch, some people, necromancer. But it's a person that he should not be dealing with. Let's put it that way. He should not be. Let me tell you about Saul. Leviticus 20, verse 6. He's the king. He knows this. And the person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them, I will set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. He knows this. As a matter of fact, Saul himself purged the land from these mediums and these spirits, these spiritists. He purged the land. He got rid of them. So now he's asking, fear causes one to be self-reliant and move away from God. Long before this, Saul was a man of courage. As a matter of fact, his people, they worshiped him in a sense because he was physically statuesque, right? And he was a man of war, so he was looked upon with great admiration. Here he is now. I say he's in the mud pit, he's in the pork pit, he's in the swine camp. Reminiscent of the prodigal son, he is way out of where he should be. He should be next to God. He should be cozying up to God. He is cozying up to a spiritist. Let's talk about another person. Elijah. Elijah, y'all remember on Mount Carmel, he slew these priests of Baal, like a whole bunch of them. He's a great man, Elijah, standing up for God. Have faith. But after he did all of this, all these wonderful things, a young lady, I don't know if she's young, but she was a lady. I don't know if she was a lady either, but a woman. She says that because you have killed my prophets, I am going to do the same thing to you in 24 hours. When Elijah got the report, Elijah trembled and fled. He was afraid. Fear, I said he fled. Fear causes selfishness, self-reliance, and separation from God. Interesting thing about this story is that Jezebel could have killed him right away. She put fear in Elijah. She put fear in it. She didn't have to do anything to him. She just put fear. And what did he do? He stopped the mission that he was given by God. I'm going to try that again. Fear causes us to abandon our mission. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, though. Let's dive a little bit deeper into Elijah. Here was a mighty man. Here's a mighty man. He was a man of courage. The strongest and most courageous man at that time, and he was afraid. So at our strongest, we're looking at this, at our strongest, at the thing that we consider to be our strongest, that's where the devil gets us at, right? That's where he gets us at. The wisest man proved himself to be the greatest fool. Solomon was the greatest fool. The greatest fool. The meekest man, Moses, the meekest man. What did he do? That you stuff? The meekest man spoke hasty and bitter words because he got to a point where he couldn't take it anymore. Abraham failed in his faith. Abraham failed in his faith. Wait a minute now. Abraham failed in his faith. Isn't he called the father of the faithful? At our strongest is where we are weakest. So now we have Elijah running away from Jezebel. Maybe he's the wisest man of all. Y'all will catch that tomorrow. Elijah says, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. I'm finished. I'm done. On the other side of fear, there is a blessing. Elijah says, I'm done. This is too much. I can't handle it. God had other things in mind for Elijah, didn't he? On the other side of fear is a blessing. The fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. The fear of man brings a snare. So I'm talking about people who should be going out and preaching the gospel. I'm talking about people, you don't have to stand on the corner. You do not have to stand on the corner. Make yourself available at your job, at your work, on the bus stop, wherever we are. Because guess what? There are people that are needing the message, the word that you have. But if we don't, first of all, make ourselves available, if we're not prepared and available, someone once says the best ability is availability. We need to be available. Sin results in fear, but obedience to God brings peace of mind. Sin results in fear, but obedience brings peace of mind. So, I want to talk about a couple other people. Those three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Interesting story. These guys are thrown into y'all remember the story? A furnace. Big enough to hold 3 people. And they said, what do they say? Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we're not careful to answer thee in this matter, because he wanted to know, well, are you guys going to bow down or are you not? He said, oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we are careful not to answer thee in this matter. You know we're not going to do it. That's what they're saying. We're not going to do it. But if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image with which thou hast set up. If ever there was a time for somebody to be afraid or be fearful, you're sitting someone's going to burn you. Someone's going to cook you. This is a time to be fearful. If ever there's a time to be fearful, you know that these people aren't playing around, because they got a furnace. That furnace was there, so they must have used it before. So this is serious business. These guys said, no, we're not gonna bow down to your gods. No. Our God is going to deliver us. But you know what? Even if he does not, we're still not going to bow down and serve your gods. Sin brings fear. Obedience to God brings peace of mind. Wouldn't you like to have that kind of a peace of mind? They were not afraid, because their position was, we are going to obey God. Now, Daniel was the same way. They threw him into a pit with a lion. Now, let's be clear. Let's be clear. I'm not saying that these guys were happy to be eaten alive or get burned up. They were not, okay, yes, come eat me or whatever. No, I'm not saying that. But their trust in God removed the terror and the dread that came with the situation. All right? Their trust in God removed the terror, the fear that came with the situation. There was a blessing on the other side of fear. They trusted God. They didn't believe the lie that Satan had told about God, that he should be feared. He's a God of, that's looking out to just like destroy you. And every time you make a mistake, he's gonna pound you into the ground. The Father is precisely like Christ when he healed the sick. The Father told him to heal, and he healed. The Father told him to raise the dead, and he raised the dead. Jesus said, I only do and say what the Father tells me to do. And so the Father is a God of love, who is not willing that any should perish. Who is not willing that any should perish. The word any means any. He wants everyone to be saved. As I live, saith the Lord, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. 1 Timothy 2:4 says, who will have all men to be saved and come into the knowledge of truth. When Adam sinned, the Father ceased all direct communication with mankind. So Jesus took on that role. He was the one in creation. He spoke the 10 Commandments. He parted the Red Sea. He directed the people through the desert. He's the one also that sent the flood. He's also the one that walked the streets of Galilee. He's also the same one that walked the streets of Galilee. The Bible says he made himself of no reputation and took on the form of servant and was made in the likeness of men. So they saw, people of Palestine, they saw this mighty God face to face, close up and personal. The folks in the desert didn't see him face to face. The folks in Sodom and Gomorrah didn't see him face to face. That's why the Bible says that it will be more tolerable. What does that say? For Sodom and Gomorrah than for the cities in the days of Christ. Because they saw him. They talked to him. They handled him. Knowledge, we are responsible for the knowledge that we get. Ladies and gentlemen, we are responsible for the knowledge and information that we get. So since then and now, how much information and knowledge has been displayed? We know the end of the story. The story wasn't written all the way through. Revelation wasn't written then. We know the end of the story. So what about us? The Bible says it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah. But what about us who now have this wealth of information? We know that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I am the Lord God, I change not. But our sinful minds make it difficult for us to understand. Okay, I said this in the beginning, that truth is not complicated. But our sinful minds make it difficult for us to understand and comprehend these things. So we must constantly expose our minds to God's radiation, his divine work, his will in our lives, by studying the life of Jesus. So as we study the life of Jesus, we're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. As we study the life of Jesus, Jesus was busy. He was busy. He was doing good. He was displaying the character of the Father. He says, if you've seen me, you have seen the Father. So whether, therefore, you eat or drink, or go to work, or settle a dispute, do all to the glory of God. Whether we eat or drink or go to work or play basketball or feed the hungry, whatever we do, do it all to the glory of God. Or be a deacon or deaconess. Do it all for the glory of God. Whatever we do. So when we live with this understanding that you are not on earth, we are not on earth for ourselves, the agenda that we have changes. So we're not talking symbolic language here. We're talking about literal, how we actually live our lives. How we actually live our lives is important. Because we can come each week and we can get fortified and not actually engage in the battle because of fear. But when we have this understanding that we were born and created for work, to do something. Jesus lived by motivation to do the will of God, right? Exodus 19:6. He said, you'll be unto me a holy nation, a holy nation. You will be a holy nation. Holy nation when? When we understand this, when will we be a holy nation? A holy nation on the Sabbath. A holy nation on Friday night. We are to be a holy nation on Tuesday. One of those days that Wednesday is hump day, but Tuesday is like one of those days like, doesn't have any real significance. Yes, we need to be holy on a Tuesday. When you're at work, we need to be holy. Holy means that we do everything in a holy way. Everything in a holy way, whatever we do. Now, if we go back to Jesus' day, you think about what the people said about him. They said, what manner of man is this? What they said, who is this dude? How he does this thing? Who is he? He is different. He's distinct. He's not like everyone else. The question is, do people say that about us? Are we different? Are we distinct? Being holy requires us to be holy 24/7, 365. But that requires us to get over our fears. Fear breeds selfishness, self-reliance, and separation from God. Christ only lived 33 and a half years. He only lived 33 and a half years. But 3.5 years in public life, the world couldn't take his righteousness. They couldn't take his righteousness. That's why they had to get rid of him. Righteousness provokes sin. Righteousness provokes sin. Let's get into that a little bit more. Someone once said, sin is like a snake lying there just waiting to move. Sin is just lying there as a snare. We used that word earlier. The moment righteousness approaches, then sin reacts. People react, and they react violently. Where sin and righteousness get along, where sin and righteousness gets along together, there is a problem. There is a serious problem. Okay? So yes, we want to live a quiet life. We all want to live a quiet life. But if you're living a righteous and a quiet life is not really, if you're living a righteous life, a quiet life is not necessarily the end result. If a quiet life is our ultimate achievement, then where does righteousness fit in? A lot of us are afraid of persecution. I'm going to say that again. A lot of us are afraid of persecution. We won't say it, and this is not a topic that people want to talk about, mostly, but it needs to be talked about. We want to live a nice, quiet life where we're not bothered or disturbed. Just go back doing our job, go back home, eat some pasta. But that's not the life that Jesus lived. That's not the life that Jesus lived. It wasn't a quiet life. And so I want to be careful to say that we're not going to be reckless. We're not going to go out and provoke people to wrath and anger. Because Jesus said when he sent his disciples out, you should be sent, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as a dove. We're not going to provoke people. But we're not going to compromise righteousness. We're not going to compromise righteousness so that we're not going to compromise righteousness so that we avoid suffering. If we do this, if we compromise righteousness because of our creature comforts, we inevitably will be robbing someone of the benefits that God created us to bestow on others. We are not completing the mission. All right? So our focus should be, let me be nice. Let's all be nice. Let's be nice together. True. It's not complicated. My focus should be truth. Let me be true. I want us to be true. But there's an aspect of this that we really need to understand, and that is our own survival. If I stick to the straight and narrow and do everything that I know I'm supposed to do, how do I survive? I mean, some jobs, you have to work on the Sabbath. If I don't hang out with these dudes, they're just going to push me away. I'm not going to be able to be in this club and this group, and they pay me a lot of money. If I don't succumb to the world's ways, I'm going to have to shrink the way I live. I might have to live in a smaller house and drive an old car. I won't be able to do the things I want to do. Salvation is based on sacrifice, right? Salvation is based on sacrifice. So Jesus paid the ultimate sacrifice. He made the ultimate sacrifice. He paid the ultimate penalty. And some of us aren't going to like this, but a sacrifice deserves a sacrifice in response. A sacrifice deserves a sacrifice in response. Up to, and including death. Told you I was uncomfortable talking about this morning. But there is peace on the other side of fear. There's a blessing on the other side of fear. So I go on. As long as your life is more precious to you than the honor of God, as long as your life is more precious to you than the honor of God, then the devil has you. We have to get to that point. We have to get to that point. And it's not comfortable to talk about. It is not comfortable to think about. We don't want to talk about these things because it hits at the heart. In World War II, the Japanese fighter pilots, when they ran out of bullets, the U.S. Navy was afraid of these guys. Because when they ran out of bullets, they would just take that plane and they would just take it and just drop it right onto the deck of a destroyer or a battleship or whatever. They didn't care. Well, I shouldn't say. They cared enough to sacrifice themselves for their country. Some of those guys in the Middle East that strap bombs and go, they call them terrorists. You know why? Because they're terrorized. You don't know where they're coming from. They will say, look, my life doesn't matter for my cause. You can't fight a person that is that determined. That is one fight you don't want to get into with a person that is that determined. If we were ever to be that determined, the devil would shudder. God needs people who are not afraid. If you're in battle with someone and that person's afraid, if you're in battle with someone and that person's afraid, you are fighting alone. As a matter of fact, you're fighting less than alone because you are thinking that you have some backup and that person is not available. The best ability is availability. That person is not available. God needs people who are not afraid and are willing to sacrifice. So I put this out there. So do we think the story of Abraham and Isaac was a fairy tale? Do we think the story of Daniel and Moses was a fairy tale? If we hold that these stories that we read in the Bible are true, are indeed true in the Word of God, then we will get to that point where we are holy all the time, where we are not afraid to preach the gospel, that we are not afraid to represent God. I think this church has been blessed with some great young people. This particular church has been blessed with some great young people that I've seen come up through the years by virtue of their parents, instilling them the virtues of God at an early basis. I think of Jamal and going to school, Andel and Samantha Grady and Samantha Bongay. These young people, and Vicky, Calvin's, these young people have stayed true throughout the years, and even after going away and some are still involved in the church, their upbringing still remains with them. They're still faithful. The younger generation that comes behind them have people to look up to and say, look, they did it, I can do it too. God needs soldiers, soldiers who will not shrink in the face of battle. So one of the things that really bother us, though, is that we still want to have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. We still want to have a nice life. So how do I balance that? How do I balance that? We still want to have a nice life. Nobody wants to live a pauper's life. For that, we're just going to go to Matthew 6:33. Anybody know what that says? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And what? All. Now we take it back down to 6:25. Therefore I say to you, take no thought for your life, what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear, what you should put on. Is not the life more than meat? There's something more important than my life and my physical well-being and survival. There is something more important than my life, my physical well-being. And that is the glory of God. If God is going to take care of the birds, the lilies of the field, the grass, the small little things, he didn't die for those. He died for you and me. So there is hope. There's hope. As Aleka comes up, there is hope. Fear not. I'm asking you. I'm imploring you. Fear not. There is a blessing on the other side of fear. What is the sum of our fears? The sum of all our fears. There's nothing that God can't handle. I pray that this message will alleviate your fears so that you can go out and engage in the battle.